Welcome to Operational Harmony, Balancing Business and Mental Well-Being, a podcast with honest discussions about professional life and mental well-being in a natural conversational way. Your host is Nikki, founder of Nikki's Office, where she supports entrepreneurs through operations, systems, and strategy. And now, let's hear from our guest.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Nikki. My name is Cam Knight. I am an author of a dozen best-selling books in the area of mental, physical, as well as emotional performance. And now I talk about a concept that I call internal resistance, which answered the question I had my whole life. And that's why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for some reason I can't or don't do it. And the reason I came to this topic is most of my life, I was a fairly driven individual. I had a lot of high hopes and aspirations of what I was going to do and the things I was going to achieve. And although I had my fair share of success, in a lot of ways, I felt like I fell short, or the success was much harder and more difficult than it needed to be, or at least it was harder and difficult than the people I noticed achieving and doing the same things. And I wondered why that was. It was the same question. Why is it if I know what to do and I have the motivation, but for some reason I either don't do it or it's much harder than the way it is? And there weren't a lot of good answers out there. Really, the best answer that kept coming up had to do with beliefs. And in personal development motivation, there's a lot of talk about beliefs. And I feel like it's a piece of the puzzle, but I don't think it's as big as people make it seem. I think there's more going on. And over, I would say, the last 15 to 20 years, that question was always in my mind. Every time I had a challenge doing something, I wondered why. Like, why can I move forward in this thing? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? And the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the brain. And over time, I just came to this realization that, wait a minute, there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. There's a part of our mind built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And in a lot of ways, resistance is this brick wall that we hit anytime we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it.
You say it's a wall. Can you tell me more about that? I'm not sure I understand what that means.
Yeah. So to really understand resistance, what really helps to know is that the part of the brain that creates wants and desires, it works separately from the part that allows us to act on that desire. This is really important, so I'll say it one more time. The part of the brain that creates wants works separate from the part that allows us to act on that want. So we have one part of the brain that is producing wants, and in many ways is producing endless wants one after another. It doesn't check to see if we have the time, energy, and resources to achieve a want or if it will be fulfilling. That's not its job. Its job is simply to produce desires and pull us towards things. But then we have another part that evaluates that want. It's the part that checks to see if we should be able to do it or if it'll be fulfilling. And this is the part that gives us the green light. Now, anytime a want or desire comes up, this part goes through a checklist of items to see if we should do it. And if none of the items are checked off, then it will prevent action. So, a great analogy for this is standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Any decision or desire that comes up must go through them. And if even any of the members is against it, it will not pass. And so, when resistance stops us, in a lot of ways, it doesn't tell us it's stopping us. It just creates this feeling of that we're not able to do the thing. Or sometimes people confuse resistance stopping us with laziness or procrastination or sabotage. those are all manifestations of resistance. So when I say it's this brick wall we can't get through, it's not a literal wall, but it's like this psychic wall that gets created, and it's like we can't push through it. We could see the action, it's right in front of us. All we have to do is raise our hand, open our mouth, or take the step, but we can't, as if we're being held back. And it can oftentimes feel like either we're being paralyzed, or as I mentioned, it can feel like we're being lazy or we're just procrastinating. And many times it shows up in distracted behavior, such as us binging on television, social media, video games, and even things like drugs and alcohol. And those are all ways that resistance will show up if it doesn't want us to do something. I hope that was a little bit clearer. If you want more clarity, I can definitely go even deeper.
That was clear.
Perfect.
So what was the key to unlocking that for you?
Yeah, the key was, as I mentioned, for most of my life, I had more aspirations than I was able to achieve. And in many ways, when I was in high school, I aspired to get into an Ivy League school. Although I got into a decent college, didn't make the Ivy League mark. And then when I was in college, I had aspirations to work for a big five accounting firm. Right now, it's a big four. Back then, it was a big five. Although I got a decent job as an accountant and I did fairly well, it wasn't that. And then there were other things that I wanted to do in between. I wanted to learn dance, I wanted to get fit, I wanted to develop certain skills. And I would get good at getting excited, but not start. Or I would start, but I would stop very quickly. And if I didn't stop, I would make progress, but not make it to the end. And if I did manage to make progress and get to the end, I stopped doing what got me the success. So I would lose the skill or I would fall off. And because this kept happening, this question kept lingering. And in a way, my mind was just always thinking about it. And as I was coming across a lot of different personal development books, coaches, and seminars, little pieces of what people were saying was I, unknown to me, was building this puzzle piece together in my mind. And then I remember the exact moment where I had the epiphany. I was at a Brendan Burchard seminar, and he had a speaker who was talking about identity and how if what you're trying to do is not in line with identity, your brain will hold you back from it. And then with that concept, with other concepts I was learning, like family systems theory and beliefs and all of that, authority issues, at a certain point, I realized, oh wow, we actually have a part of ourselves that is designed to hold us back. And that epiphany came about, I would say, 5 to 6 years ago. And from there, I really got really into the topic, and it's expanded into to as big as it is now in terms of how I talk about it. We won't be able to cover everything in this podcast because it does go deep, but I do have a course on it, and it's really a manifestation of, I would say, decades of struggle and then this aha moment. And since that moment, really developing it out. And what's really interesting, Nikki, is I've only really started talking about it on podcasts recently. Like I started talking about it a little bit ago, but really made a push to do it maybe in the 5 to 6 months. And in trying to articulate this concept, it's really bloomed into something that people have really resonated with and really feel like they have struggled with it themselves their whole life.
Yeah, that's the power of stories, right? It's learning that, oh, wait, since you said that, that is something I've dealt with. But if you just said
Yeah.
there's this resistance that we have to things, people would just go, no, I've never done that. But once you get into the
Yeah.
story behind it, it's, oh, wait, yeah, my brain does stupid things like that all the time.
Yeah, stories are powerful. And if we can get sidetracked a little bit, I have my own experience with stories. So, being an author of a dozen book, I was really good at explaining things, explaining deeper concepts in a way that people really resonated with. And they really liked it because I would explain things that other people weren't talking about, or explain it in a way that people didn't understand with other people's explanations. And then when I started to speak more about my books and things like that, where I joined Toastmasters and I was learning to be a public speaker and things of that nature, this concept of telling your story kept coming up. And I was like, nah, man, I'm really good at how I explain things anyways. And then I got into this coaching program to help me market my business. And then over there, I learned marketing is storytelling. And then it kept coming up, but I kept avoiding it. And it's wild because what has taken me, I would say, decades of studying, learning, applying, and writing a dozen books and traveling to over 100 countries worth of experiences to come up with the knowledge that I am imparting on people, someone can just do in a simple story. And people would resonate with the story more than me. And I'm like, what the heck, man? But yeah, stories are definitely powerful, and people definitely do resonate with stories a lot more. And it's what's crazy is about 6 months ago, I heard Lisa Nichols speak. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's one of the stars of the movie The Secret, that widely popular movie that kind of became huge about 20 years ago. And when she was on stage, do you know what she said that really made me focus more on stories? Is she says, people don't care about what you know, they care about your story.
I think the famous quote is people don't care what you know, they care about how you came to know it.
Ah, okay. That's
I
even more
think
profound.
it's close, maybe. Look, it's as close as I'm getting anyway.
I like that better, actually.
Because
People don't care
it's,
about what you know, but how you came to know it.
yeah. So, the obvious, usually when you learn something new, there is a reason behind it. There's a hardship that happens that turns you
Yeah,
to thinking in a certain way, and then that story gets told, and people go, "Oh yeah, no, yeah, that is exactly my. I went through something similar. That's why I was looking for this information. I definitely
yeah,
want to hear it from you because
yeah,
I resonate with you. It's the
yeah.
no trust thing all
It's
over again."
it is. It really comes back to that, and something like a story can really help with that. And it's interesting because for me, stories wasn't as impactful. When I would listen to, or when I was learning a lot of this concept, and I was going to seminars or reading books or getting the coaching, people would go into these stories, and literally I would tune out. And because I tuned out, I didn't think it was important or mattered to others. But what I didn't, the connection I didn't make is the fact that everyone's spending all this time on stories means it must be important and that people are connecting to it if I'm not. So just because a person doesn't really care or relate to someone's stories doesn't mean that it's not going to be important for them to tell their stories if they want to make a meaningful impact in other people's lives. And I'll be honest, Nikki, I don't tell as much stories as I probably could. In fact, when I am explaining some of these concepts, I feel like I do a decent enough job of it, but maybe adding some stories could really help people to really solidify their understanding or connect and resonate with it to actually take action on some of the tips and advice I'm offering.
I think stories help everything. If you hear somebody's story about how they grew up, you understand them and where they're coming from, and so
Uh,
that you can better treat them. But on the other hand, if you don't know somebody, if they never show emotion or they never tell you, I had an actual childhood that actually
yeah,
happened that was actually not okay, and you mess up, somebody's going to be way more harsher on the person without the backstory that never talks about anything
Yeah.
than they are going to be on the person who tells the story. Now, I am not saying that that means that people shouldn't care about the person who doesn't tell their story, because it's nobody's business what that person's story is. They
Yeah.
shouldn't have to tell you every aspect of their life in order for you to have compassion when they mess up.
Yeah.
But people are more likely to forgive and forget when even small things, or even sometimes way bigger things, if they understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. It's huge, isn't it? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes not only do we does someone's story help us understand that perspective, we forget that sometimes we need to give somebody a perspective so they can understand us better, whether it is in business or storytelling or just a minor thing. And I have something really cool to share because earlier today, I had somebody give me a call who had recommended me her, who I had someone who recommended me her husband to work with me one on one. And in our communication, I said something that her husband kind of got triggered by. And so she called me about it. And initially, I was like, it doesn't seem like a big deal. It was just one sentence. I put a smiley face to make sure they knew I wasn't being too harsh and critical. But it wasn't getting through. And then when I told her, I'm like, listen, this is my schedule. This is what's going on. And and I've had people cancel and flake on me last minute. And I said this just to make sure that he understood that, I'm making special time for him. Once I told that backdrop and that perspective, it diffused the situation. Not that there was a
Mm-hmm.
situation, but just diffuse that. Oh, hey, okay, I get it. Now I see where you're coming from, and yeah, it does help. And even the person trying to be stood forgets that sometimes they do need to add that backdrop.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am the blunt one. I'm
Yeah,
not the type of blunt that means that I'm going to go around saying mean things to people.
yeah.
It's not who I am. But if this is the fifth time we've talked today, I don't care about your kids. I'm not saying hi. I'm getting right into what we need to talk about.
Yeah,
And if you can't be okay with that, we might have because we don't always have to talk. There's obviously a situation going if I'm talking to you this much in a day. So I don't have time to do all that. And sometimes when you're working with people, you do talk to them multiple times in a day or multiple
yeah.
times in a week. And if nothing new has come up, can we please just get to what we called about?
I know.
I'm not your secret lover. I just need you to know that the bank account needs to be fixed or whatever. And so let's do that and not spend 30 minutes talking about the garden you did, because look, lady, I'm allergic to flowers. I think they're cute from
Yeah.
afar. Don't get them near me, please. I like being able to breathe. It was, understanding that some people, and when I write in an email, I'm usually like, nope, this is what happened. This is what we're going to do, that type of thing. And so just sometimes people have to understand that I am weird, and I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm not trying to be an automaton or anything. I'm just trying to get my work done.
Yeah, I experience that a lot because I tend to be that way as well. I tend to be more direct, more just stay on the ball and not get lost everywhere. And I do find it a little bit challenging when people get triggered by that. And even though I can explain, hey, there wasn't any ill will behind it. It comes from love, especially when I'm working with clients. Sometimes a client needs to hear the hard truth, and sometimes they need to hear it in, I don't want to say a harsh way, but in a direct way. Otherwise, they just won't hear it. And then when they do get it directly, it's, oh, why did you say it like that? And it's not about how I'm saying it, it's about the content. Let's focus on that. And some people get lost in the how versus what. And I also get it because in the past, it didn't matter what someone said or how they said it. I would get triggered or take it personally, even if they were saying it nicely. Or even if they weren't saying anything mean, I was just at a point where I was a lot more sensitive. And oftentimes it didn't matter how someone said something or even what my mind was going to perceive it or receive it as negative. And it created lots of deliciously awkward moments. So I get it, but sometimes the direct does help. I am trying to find that middle ground at this point where at a certain point, I don't need to be too direct, but at the same time, not lose myself
Yeah.
just because someone can receive. And I think it is getting challenging because now, as society, we're becoming a lot more individual than ever before. What I mean by that is, back in the day, there was only three main television stations and a couple of newspapers, and so everybody was on the same page on a lot of levels. The information they were receiving, how that information was being received, how to communicate, and there were certain social norms that was pretty standard across the board. Yes, there was a bit of some people didn't understand it all, but it was pretty standard. Now we're living in a time with hundreds of television channels, hundreds of different people we're following on social media and then YouTube. There's information coming from so many directions and it's widely extreme. Some people are very rambunctious, others are on the other spectrum, and we're just getting so much information that we've all become very different and we interpret information very differently. And I think it's really creating this huge communication gap to the point we're all just toning down our communication just so we're not sensitive to anyone. And I think it's making it harder to really understand or get ourselves to be understood.
I agree with that in a lot of ways. I know that there are a lot of people who, as soon as you say one word, will fly off the handle.
I know.
And I am so sorry, Miss Sparkly Pants, but I don't care how upset you're going to be. If you're not supposed to be doing something in business and you bring that to me and are like, hey, I did this way, and I go, no, that's not how you do that. You do it this way. And you get offended because I told you were doing it wrong.
Yeah,
That's not on me. At a certain point, you have to become responsible for yourself. You have to
yeah,
be responsible for your own feelings and realize that not everybody, that whole thing about microaggression was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. People are mad at you, and you can prove it by how they treat you. Will they peel an orange for you? Dude, I'm not peeling an orange. It makes my hands burn. But that doesn't mean I'm going to hand it to somebody else and get mad because they won't do it either. Like,
yeah,
no, stop eating oranges. Get it, go eat something else then.
yeah. And then when we look at relationships, I am finding that less and less people are happy in relationships and they're not working as much or they're not lasting as long. And people are becoming a lot more, I don't want to use the word stressed out, but defeated. And I think it's because of these disconnects we're having. We're becoming a lot more sensitive and it's hard to communicate our sensitivity. And it's creating a lot more, what's the word? Challenges, not just in the relationship, but keeping it going for an extended period. I have had many clients where we work on relationships. And one of the things I tell them, because a lot of times they think like it's them because things aren't working for them. And I have to be like, no, that's not 100% because now we're just living in a time and in a culture where our attention spans, one, it's shorter. We are looking for that dopamine hit much quicker. And unfortunately, that shows up in our relationships. So we might find somebody really attractive, get this really dopamine high, and it's like lovey dovey. But because we become so accustomed to just swiping for another dopamine hit and then buying something for another one, we almost need another person for that new dopamine hit. And not only that, but then our conversations are difficult to have, or we're finding it more difficult to communicate and help a person understand where we're at, what we're seeking, without them getting triggered and things of that nature. So it's definitely showing up in relationships in a lot of ways.
Yeah. The word triggered usually triggers a response to me. Because like I'll get somebody who I don't like how you said that. You triggered me. And I'm like, okay, go deal with it. I don't care. I and I don't mean that I don't care about people, because there are certain people that I care for very much. But there are others I don't know you enough. I'm not the one who goes up to strangers and tells them I love them. I sure as heck don't hug them. That's not, I don't say things I don't mean. And if I'm walking up to a stranger and telling them that I love them, there is a problem. And this is an emergency, okay? If I ever walk up to somebody I don't know and hug them and say I love you, dude, get me out of whatever situation I'm in, because there is 100% cops needed, okay? Because I don't do either one of those things. But sometimes when we get triggered, we have to see, first of all, why did we get triggered? What happened? Is it actually the other person's fault? Or were they just talking and you decided to take offense? Here's the other thing. Just because you're offended doesn't mean that person doesn't have the right to say it. What freedom of speech means. Being in the US, you have a freedom of speech. In most places nowadays, you have some form of freedom of speech, as long as you're not inciting violence, saying there's a fire in a packed building when there's not, that kind of thing. When you're not acting stupid, you do tend to have freedom of speech. There are countries that don't allow certain topics, but go to a podcast, they don't allow them either. So stay in your lane. But usually, if you are being civil with people, you have that freedom of speech type deal. And with that freedom of speech, guess what? You are free to say what you want, but you are not free from the consequences of what you say. So if you go up to somebody and you're like, you know what? I have the freedom of speech. You're an ugly duck and I don't know why you work here. That's not going to go over well with pretty much anybody. You might be going to HR or just getting fired flat out. But if you're talking to somebody and you say that you went to Red Robin the other day and all of a sudden they're like, you just triggered me. Why? Like, you need to get over the fact that Red Robin gave you a bad meal one time. I don't know. They've given me good food most of the time. So I don't have a problem with them. But so that kind of thing, where everybody is always, it's always about me. And when you're in a relationship, it's not always about you, it's about us. So how do we as a team face any situation that's coming against us? Am I in a long-term relationship? No, because no. But that doesn't mean that if I do get into one, I'm still going to be, oh, this is me, I do me, and you do you, because that's not a relationship. That's not an us. That is not a we. So you can dopamine chase yourself into a relationship, but then once you're there, it takes work to keep it. And saying that you got triggered because he mentioned, I don't know, going to McDonald's one day and your sister almost died from McDonald's. Not that I believe McDonald's has ever tried to kill anybody. Let's lay that out there. But I'm going to break up with him because he wants to go to McDonald's, and how dare he? First of all, does he know? Second of all, if he likes McDonald's and he wants to go almost die, let him. It's not, you're not eating it, right? So I think sometimes we have to get over ourselves. And as a society, not just as individuals, but everybody just needs to take a step back and reevaluate how much of what is going on is really a problem and how much of it is you saying there's a problem. And then, like Karens, right? We all know about Karens. We all know that if we go into a grocery store and there's somebody yelling about the macadamia nuts, that they are a nut, and we need to just keep going. And hopefully they stop yelling at the cashier because that person doesn't deserve it. But they're not yelling at that cashier because the bag of macadamia nuts is 3 cents higher at the register than it was at the stand or whatever. There's something else going on in that person's life. Even if it is just, I hate my life today. We have those days.
Yeah.
Do I yell at somebody about macadamia nuts or anything else in a grocery store? Probably not. I do get lippy if the line's moving really slowly, but that's because of me being me. I don't like a lot of people around me, and people in lines tend to stand like that close to each other. From kindergarten, I don't know. I don't like it. But so I get a little lippy, but I don't yell at people. I try to keep my comments under my breath because I have to say them, but I don't want to say them. It's a thing. But even in those situations, like I know that I may offend somebody around me. And if I do, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to deal with a situation that it is well out of my control. And so we're fine. Also, just in case people are concerned, I don't usually go into grocery stores anymore. So we're good. Like, I don't have to deal with that too much. But, and with self checkout, you don't usually have the long lines that we used to anyway.
Yeah.
But knowing that, like being able to identify what the problem is half the battle. Once you identify, oh, I was probably too harsh on that person. All they said was that they went to Red Robin for lunch. I shouldn't get offended by that. People get to eat where they want to eat.
Yeah.
Just identifying it and being able to say, oops, I'll apologize to them later, is a grown up thing to do. It's a hard grown up thing to do because we don't like saying I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right?
And you said a couple of things that's important to riff on. One is a lot of times when we do get triggered, that trigger elicits a bunch of thoughts. And because the thoughts are in our head, we think we're thinking them. But it's not necessarily our own thoughts or our own thinking. It's actually the thoughts of the emotion that we're in. And so a lot of times it just helps to become aware when if a person is getting defensive or they are saying certain things, is that their own thoughts or is it just the thinking that's coming up because they're in that emotional state? So sometimes it just helps to say, oh, wow, I'm just like getting defensive and this isn't really even a big deal. But what's more important to realize, and this is a concept that I do try to teach people, especially when I'm working with a client in relation to relationships, is just because you're angry doesn't mean someone did anything wrong. And this is a very important concept because a lot of times when we do get angry or quote unquote triggered, it's usually towards someone, and those feelings can make it seem like we were wronged. And because we were wronged, somebody wronged us. And because the feeling is coming from what someone did, we can assume it's from that specific person. But they may not have done anything. They may not have even had the awareness that they did anything. And if they did, it wasn't out of intent, ill will. It just happened and you got triggered, and it may make it seem like it was their fault and that they need to fix it. But oftentimes it's not. And this shows up a lot in relationships, especially if a person has been together for a while and they get triggered out of the blue. It's easy to just assume was because of what this person did that I'm triggered. So it must mean that they did something wrong and they have to fix it or they have to apologize. When if we could just look at and see, did they do anything wrong? Is there really an issue here? Or am I just having this person trying to manage my emotions? So this is really important. And then going back to what you're saying, sometimes it just helps to not even get to the point of apologizing if we did something that we shouldn't have done or said, but being in the awareness of, are we in an emotional state and what are the thoughts that it's creating? Are these my thoughts? And is this a thought that it's going to be helpful, or would I have this thought if I was in a different state? Just that can be really huge in not only diffusing situations, but for but to keep them from even having a situation, if that makes sense.
So going back to the conversation, your first topic, because I think that covered like the mental health stuff. English is the only language I have, so I don't even have that excuse of I was thinking in Spanish and couldn't remember the word in English.
Yeah.
But going back to the internal resistance, I think we have that for business, we have that for our personal stuff, we have that in relationships. I want
Yeah.
this relationship to be better, but I can't stop saying stupid things, or
Yeah.
if I just did this in my relationship, it would be better. Sometimes we need to not think like that because the relationship is done anyway,
Yeah.
and there's no coming back from, I don't know. For me, there is no coming back from cheating. And other people, they're perfectly okay with it. I don't understand that thinking at all. You do you. But just know if you cheat on me, you're going to be as bald as Mr. Cam Knight over there. um, but for the internal resistance, what is like one way you recommend that people jump over that wall or go Kool-Aid
Yeah,
man
over
through
that
it or something?
over that hurdle. So this is a question that requires understanding resistance a little bit deeper, as well as our wants, because first we have to look at our wants. As I mentioned, the part of the brain that creates wants is in a way unrestrained. So it's creating wants all the time. And when it creates the want, it releases some really powerful emotions. Some of the times the feelings can be really euphoric. I really need to have this thing. And oftentimes those feelings can make it seem like, yes, we'll be able to take action and actually get it. And it's doing that for so many things that it's impossible for any one person to achieve all the wants that their brain is producing. It really helps by starting with the wants first, making sure we're not going after too many wants and that we're not overextending ourselves, and making sure that the wants that we are going after is actually going to be fulfilling. Because just because a brain creates a want for something, it makes it seem like it will be fulfilling, doesn't actually mean that it will. So that's really the first place to start is with the wants. Now, I just talked about one challenge our wants create. There's actually a whole list of challenges it creates. We won't go into it all here, but it is important to start with the wants. Then, as I mentioned, anytime we do have a want or desire, it gets evaluated by another part of the brain called resistance. And this part evaluates the wants using a whole host of criterias. And if the desire is not in line with any of the criterias, it will prevent action. So what that means is that there's many causes of resistance. And it really helps to look at what is causing the resistance that's keeping us from taking action, or making it much harder than it should be, or creating the progress that we need. And some of it is pretty common knowledge now with a lot of person development, because a lot of it relates to beliefs, habits, and comfort zones. But some of it goes like really deep. It goes to how sensitive you are to the pain of mistakes, how sensitive you are to the pain of thoughts, judgments, and reactions and actions of other people. It goes into our demographics, authority issues, imposter. And so there's different layers, and it's not always easy to access the layer. But what's more important is not so much that what the cause of the resistance is, but how is resistance showing up, which I call the tricks of resistance. So anytime the brain puts a brakes in our lives, it doesn't tell us that it's putting the brakes in our lives. And more importantly, it doesn't tell us why. So if self-esteem or self-image is a culprit, your mind's not going to go, hey, Nikki, you know this thing that you want to do, it goes against our belief, so I can't let you do it. No, instead, resistance shows up other ways. And there's many tricks resistance uses to keep us from doing things, and it has all sorts of tricks up its sleeves. So we have to be aware of the tricks. Some of the more obvious tricks are things like getting caught in a cycle of watching or binging on television, social media, video games, or drugs and alcohol. And I say these are obvious because when we're doing these things, a part of us knows we should be doing something different. Like part of us knows we should be maybe going to the gym or working on our homework and things of that nature. But then there's other tricks that are not so obvious. Some examples of them include planning, perfectionism, and things of that nature. Because when we're planning, it could seem like we're working on the goal. But if all we do is plan and not take any action, then resistance wins because we haven't made progress. Or if we go into an overly high state of perfectionism, trying to make sure everything is perfect before releasing it out into the world or before moving forward with it. So all the time we spend on perfecting is all the time we're not putting into actually moving forward with the thing. So resistance wins again. And again, these are tricks because it seems like we're working on the goal, task, or activity or making progress on it, but really there is no progress. And then once we can understand the tricks, we can understand we're in resistance. And so how do we get past it? There's many ways to get past it. And the simplest way I would suggest is with self-talk. That's because the human mind is complex and it takes some work to understand what the causes of resistance are and actually do the necessary things we need to address those causes. But a lot of that can be achieved simply by self talk. And what I mean is, you simply create a statement of the direction that you want or the outcome you're seeking and repeat that statement regularly. Now, it may not seem like doing that can have such a big effect, but it's huge. That's because words are powerful. The words we say to ourselves literally go in our mind, and our brain will use those words to create our outcome. And for some, the more resistance we have, the more we have to repeat those words. But if we can get that outcome. So let's say somebody wants to go to the gym more. They might repeat something like, I am healthy and fit. I go to the gym and exercise 3 times a week. Again, it may not seem like just repeating those words can do anything, but you'd be surprised. And the reason I start with this, especially for people on podcasts, is because when you have resistance, you want to start with little things that get big results. Simple things that have bigger outcomes. And nothing is as simpler as self talk because all you have to do is talk. And you don't have to go out and put yourself in difficult situations or anything like that. You just repeat a set of words. But like I said, those words do go into our mind, and it starts creating the actions and reactions that reinforce the words. And then a person will naturally find themselves doing it. So I would say, if to answer your question, I know it was pretty long winded. We start with the want, we look at our resistance, we see how our resistance is showing up. But if you just want the fastest way to move forward, then we create statements of the outcome we're seeking or the end result we're wanting, and then repeating those statements.
Mm-hmm. So mindset keeps coming up.
Mm, I would say I'm pretty anti mindset. I'm not a big mindset person. So, a lot of times, people, when I say self talk, they think about positive thinking. It might seem like it's the same thing, but they're vastly different. Positive thinking and mindset is a way of kind of thinking and and it can be helpful. But self-talk is actually repeating a set of statements over and over. And you don't just do it like a few times, but over and over until those statements start creating the behavior that we want. Very different thing, two different things. The topic of internal resistance is very deep, and most podcasts I've been on, the host said that was their longest podcast, and we've already gone an hour into it, and we can go even more. So there isn't one thing, but I do have 3 free gifts for all the listeners who did make it all the way here. And the first gift is called Prompt Engineering for Your Mind. The human brain was the original ChatGPT, and you can prompt it just ChatGPT to not only give you answers and solutions, but to help you act on them. So there's a so you can that's the first gift, the first guide. The second guide is how to build habits and behaviors in your sleep. I alluded to how self-talk can be very powerful in helping us take more action. And we can actually use self-talk to create all kinds of habits and behaviors and actions in our life. And the second guide will teach that. The third guide is essentially going deeper into the topic of internal resistance. It talks about all the ways our wants can create challenges in our lives, how resistance, the different causes of resistance, as well as the additional tricks that our mind will use. And they can get all three of them on my website at camknight.com. And if anybody wants to work with me one on one, I have developed a technique that helps people break their barrier between the conscious and unconscious, where we can do the work on resistance and the emotions on the unconscious level. And when we work on the unconscious level, the outcome is much faster and much quicker. And we do address those emotions and triggers to not manage them, but release them so they don't even come up. If a person's interested in that, they can email me at mentor@camknight.com.